Hey guys, Rexasaur here, and welcome to a spin-off for my Warhammer lore series, where I'm basically going to talk to you using the information that CA has given us about the game, and also the information that I know from playing the tabletop and playing against or as some of these factions on the tabletop, about how you can use the battlefield tactics on the Total War battlefield. Now, what I'm going to be doing is looking at the formations or general tactics used on the tabletop, how they can be implemented in the game, and also how the legendary lords and their new abilities that have been showcased by Total War and Creative Assembly on their Twitter page and on their forums, which will be linked in the description below, how those can impact your choice on what kind of army you're going to bring to the field, and also how they're going to boost your tactics and how your men are going to fight. So I've written down basically 4 very important sort of formations that the Empire can use. Now, the main one is the gun line. This is because the Empire have a lot of cannons, they have a lot of sort of vehicles such as the steam tank, and they also have a lot of ranged artillery and guns. Basically, they have things like the handgunners or the crossbowmen to an extent. A very common tactic when playing Empire on the tabletop is just to form a big line full of handgunners and cannons with engineers which aren't actually in the game. Just basically shoot down anything that comes towards you. And this is a very valid tactic within the game of Total War Warhammer, I'm going to assume, because we basically still have those units. Apart from having no Master Engineer, which is quite odd, but I guess they'll come later on, and if it doesn't come, then I'm sure it won't be too much of a problem, because we have Balthazar Gelt, which I'll come on to later. The next one is what I've named the Cavalry Charger. Basically, this is taking a hell of a lot of cavalry, and, you know, like the Cavalry Orders, the Rexasaurs, Demi-Griffs, Pegasus Knights to an extent, and not a lot of infantry, so basically just a big cavalry spam, because the Empire have some of the strongest cavalry in the game. I mean, compared to the Orcs, who have like shitty cavalry, the Dwarves, who have no cavalry, and the Vampires, who only have one good unit of cavalry, they should be able to completely destroy any kind of infantry-based thing. Along with Karl Franz on Deathclaw, that is just a killer combination of charging into the enemy. Of course, this can be sort of mixed and matched to an extent between the gun line and having some cavalry just to charge into the back, but you don't really want a gun line come into it. But the gun line is very similar to, say, Empire, in how you play Empire Toll and just having a big gun line of guns just shooting at the enemy. Whilst a cavalry charge is pretty much like playing the Huns, but without the missile cav, although they do have missile outriders, which have basically got handguns on them, which are pretty insane. The next one is called the Militia Spam. This is just spamming a lot and a lot of very weak troops and completely overwhelming the enemy. I don't think that's going to be much of a use in Total War Warhammer, because you've only got a limited amount of you've only got a 20 unit, army size, or 40 if you're playing 2 armies or whatever. But I don't think that's going to be very big. But it is a tactic on the tabletop that's used, just spamming militia, because militia aren't bad units. But I mean, in Total War Warhammer, it's not about overwhelming the enemy with numbers, really, because you've only got a 20 unit slot, whilst in the tabletop, because militia are cheap in points cost, so in gold cost, I guess, then it's easy to just overwhelm the enemy with them. So that might not be used on the thing, but it exists. I'm telling you that this exists. The next one is the Greatsword and Halberds tactic, which I've sort of named the hoplite tactic. So if you've played Rome Total War, or Rome 2, more likely, the way the Greeks play is to have just a line of basically spearmen, and then have javelins behind throwing at them. The Greatsword and Halberds tactic is similar to this, because you're basically going to want to have a line of halberds, wait until the enemy come to you, and then send your greatswords through and just absolutely destroy. You're also going to be wanting to have cavalry to do hammer and anvil strikes, but that's pretty much a very similar way to how you would play in Rome 2 with the Greek factions. So those are the 4 main. I'm going to say 3 because the militia spam is probably never going to be used. Although you can probably spam a few units of militia for the lols, just to use as cannon fodder for like magic or stuff. But those are the main three tactics that can be used by the Empire on the tabletop, and will probably translate really well onto the battlefield. In the videos that CA have shown us, when we've seen the Empire, we've seen a lot of the Greatsword Halberd kind of tactic. We've seen a mix and match, but the Greatsword and Halberd was the one that they showed at Blackfire Pass, which worked pretty well. I mean, they obviously had cannons and stuff. You're going to be having cannons. You're playing Empire. But this is really important kind of thing to keep in mind, that the gunline has not actually been shown. We've only seen a dwarf gunline, really. And some of you have actually played the dwarf gunline formation. So now I'm going to look at the legendary lords. We're first going to look at Emperor Karl Franz. So here's a picture of his special abilities that you can get. I think he only gets some of them over time as you do the quests in the game. But 3 of them are completely pointless when it comes to battlefield tactics. Apart from maybe Deathclaw. I mean, Deathclaw to an extent means that he can go into the cavalry charger formation and do exceedingly well, but he will be mostly used as an inspiring presence for things like the Greatsword Halberd or the gunline. Although I don't think he'll do amazing in the gunline formation. Definitely not as good as Balthazar. So Karl Franz's abilities that you should really be looking at are the Stand Your Ground, which raises attack, defense, and morale stats for your men. That is just amazing when it comes to Greatsword Halberd, the hoplite tactic, because you're going to be standing your ground, and having an erased attack means that your halberds are going to be able to hold the enemy slightly. The greatswords are just going to do insane damage, and they're not going to break under pressure, especially if you're going to be charged by things like orcs or vampires, because they're pretty scary, or to an extent chaos at some point. Leader of Men means that his battlefield aura is larger. The fact that he's on Deathclaw means that he can move swiftly to help those men that are about to lose their morale. So that is really useful when it comes to a static line kind of formation. So to an extent, the gun line might work if he can dive down on the enemies that are harassing the gun line with Deathclaw, and then the gun line can shoot at the people who are in combat with him. But I'm not sure that that's really a very good tactic to use with Karl Franz. And then the final ability that's really important is Heroic Leader, which means that he can do a heroic speech, which I think is going to be pretty much the same as Rally, but just an incredibly good rally, which basically raises the morale of target units just massively. I think for the if militia spam was a thing, which I'm not sure if it will. I mean, I don't know how much things are going to cost gold-wise in game and stuff like that, so I don't know if the militia spam is a thing. But Heroic Leader, a massive rally on militia, will probably turn the tide massively, in the way that the enemy are going to have slightly elite, or if you're going to have orcs and goblins, militia will pretty much go toe-to-toe against them anyway. And having that extra morale means that the enemy your militia aren't going to rout. If you have any kind of militia units in your army, and you've got a gun line, for example, or a cannon, you're going to be shooting into combat with the militia, then having great morale and not routing is basically like having peasants that never rout. It's great, because you don't really care if you lose them, and you're going to be killing most of the enemy's elite units by holding them down like that. So that's a very possible tactic. The next one is Balthazar. Now, Balthazar opens up a very, very awesome tactic to use with the gun line and the cavalry charger. Now, I'm not 100% sure if in Total War Warhammer Balthazar's going to be riding his Pegasus, because as we saw, Karl Franz gets Deathclaw in his abilities. Here, Balthazar isn't shown to have his Pegasus. I can't remember what Pegasus is called, but he doesn't have it, which means I'm not sure if he's going to be on foot. If he's going to be on foot, he's only really going to be useful in gunline and the hoplites. If not, then he's going to be pretty much useful in all 3 of the tactics. The first one is Evasion, which means that he gets increased speed and acceleration. I'm going to assume that he is going to get his Pegasus. Evasion means that he's really fast. He's going to be able to go to your gunline and help out where he needs to be at any point. That's really useful. Arcane Conduit is probably the best ability he has, because it means you can put extra wizards into the army, and he's always going to have good winds of magic around him, which means the wizards on your side are going to be able to do the big spells much faster than the enemy are. And that means that Balthazar is going to be able to cast spells. If you get, like, the tactic I'm thinking in my head is if you have either gunline or a hoplites, you have, instead of, obviously, because there's no javelins in game or things like peeler throwers or peltasts, having 3 wizards, so Balthazar and 2 wizards, along your hoplite line to be doing those offensive spells over the halberds, it's just going to be basically that. It's just going to be insane. It's going to be great. And the fact that Balthazar's there, increasing the winds of magic, is going to be really helpful. The Plague of Rust is amazing against cavalry, and most likely against any kind of heavy armoured troops, because it lowers the resistance of armour, which means that people and cavalry and stuff, they're going to be really weak or much weaker, especially against halberds if they're cavalry, or against great swords if they're infantry. This is why I think the hoplite tactic is going to be great with Balthazar if he has Plague of Rust. Earthing is fantastic, but only for Balthazar, and I think it gives him a really big advantage because he has reduced chance of miscasting, which means you can pretty much rely on Balthazar getting most of his spells working straight away. So that's really good. Mighty Forge, I've sort of missed one, but Mighty Forge means that the gun line / cannon line tactic works insanely because he's increasing the armor of war machines, which means that enemies that have ranged, so in this case, like, the issue is that Chaos and Vampires don't really have range. Orcs do, because they have things like the Doom Diver, they have things such as Orc Arrow Boys and just Bowmen in general. Increasing the armor of war machines will be really useful. And I don't know what war machines count as. I don't know if that is just a steam tank and then the celestial, like, cannon thing, or if it does count also the cannons and the Hellblast, the volley guns, and the other stuff. So those are the 2 legendary lords. I personally think Balthazar is better than Karl Franz. That's my opinion. Karl Franz definitely is more awesome in terms of lore. I'm not going to deny that. And I think Karl Franz is obviously really, really good at taking on large swathes of people, but in the terms, like in the lore of Warhammer, it's all about the characters. So Karl Franz is obviously a really good character, really good at taking on large men. Whilst Balthazar, I think, is much more based towards Total War, in the fact that he's going to be buffing your units or completely debuffing the enemy. The thing that isn't shown is that Karl Franz probably has other abilities, like the general abilities that a general has, such as Rally, such as a War Cry, or things like that. We don't know the effect that has on the enemy. Balthazar has the Law of Metal. We don't know what that encompasses either, apart from Plague of Rust. So we can only assume that Balthazar is going to have some pretty sick spells, as well as the fact that he miscasts less, and he increases the winds of magic. So which means that other wizards can use his force. And wizards we know are going to be fucking powerful, and the fact that those are going to be doing really powerful spells quite easily because of Balthazar's presence means that he's probably the best thing for your tactics and your units. Finally, I want to just overview very quickly the heroes in the game for the Empire. So we have the Captain, which is basically just a miniature general. He's probably going to be able to ride a Demigryph or a Griffin or Pegasus or whatever with a mount. He's going to be really useful in things like the Hoplite line or the Cavalry Charger line. He's not going to be very useful in the gun line. Next we have the Warrior Priest. This is I love Warrior Priests. Warrior Priests are basically people, they're not wizards, but they give out prayers and Sigmar answers them, and they buff units next to them. That's what happens in the tabletop. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to work in the in Warhammer, but so the Warrior Priest is going to be really cool because he's a melee warrior, but he's also a caster, which means that he's going to be able to cast little buffs on the units around him. Maybe it'll work a bit like I don't know how it's going to work, to be honest, so I'm not even going to try and guess. But I can only assume that it's going to be buffing units to give them increased attack or increased melee defense or things like that. Next we have witch hunters, which will have, and I have to really stress this one, if you have a gun line, you must take a witch hunter or take wizards. You need your extra range stuff to really add. And witch hunters are basically, they're ranged heroes. In the tabletop, witch hunters are great at taking out monsters, so things like giants, things like dragons, things like juggernauts or dragon ogres or other things. So big creatures, things that aren't like normal infantry that the great swords can't get rid of or the guns can't get rid of. Because witch hunters have like they're there to hunt big things. They're great. So you need to have at least one. I don't know how effective they're going to be, and I don't know. This is all speculation. I've not been given any of the stats. We've never seen a witch hunter in any of the CA trailers yet, or things like that. We only know that it's going to be in the game because it's what's on the forum under the Empire roster. And then next, the Empire also get 2 wizards. They get Celestial Wizards, which have the Law of Heavens, and Light Wizards, which get the Law of Light. Both of these wizards are buff wizards, except the Celestial to an extent, which is a very offensive wizard. I'm kind of surprised we don't have Bright Wizards yet, as in the Empire doesn't have any Bright Wizards, which are the Fire Wizards, Law of Fire, which is very strange because a lot, like the base of the base of the Empire, like when it comes to magic, is a lot of people see the Fire Wizards as being the main bits. They're like one of the strongest orders of wizards. So it's very strange to not see them in the main roster yet. We probably will be later on. But it's probably to give the Empire a bit of a balance, to be honest, to give them less of a like completely offensive. But Light Wizards and Celestial Wizards are still very strong. Light Wizards will be very strong in a hoplite line and a gun line. Light Wizards actually on the tabletop also give massive boost to things like initiative, which is speed, and attacks and things like that. So in a cavalry charger line, maybe in that formation they would be good if they can get those buff on the cavalry before they charge, because they're going to be insane. Celestial Wizards are great for dealing damage and just slowing down the enemy and things like that. So they're very good. They're a debuff and also a kind of big comet kind of people. So getting Balthazar on the field with them is going to help them get those big spells off. Whilst also, even without Balthazar, they're still going to be strong. I would always put a wizard in an army anyway, because you're taking Empire, you might as well take wizards. So there you go. That's my thing. That's my tactics overview for the Empire using what CA have given us. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you are going to look forward to my dwarf one, which I will be doing eventually at some point. And I hope that this helps. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like if you liked this video. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will see you next time.